Here are the 5 reasons why people are leaving Bellingham, Washington. Hey everyone, it's Aldo here with the Levain Real Estate Team in Bellingham and Whatcom County with Windermere. I'm sharing you, these are the top 5 reasons why people are leaving Bellingham and let alone just Washington State. Now, if you can't get through the first few, you definitely won't like the last one. And there is a golden rule. Realtors are to never talk about this one topic, and that is our 5th reason. So stay tuned to the end of the video because reason number 5 is the biggest reason why people are leaving Bellingham and the state alone. So reason number 1, of course, you may have heard it, but it is our weather. And a lot of people come to Bellingham because they love our weather, but people who probably have moved here recently in the last couple of years, and especially a lot of people who have grown up in Washington, tend to leave Bellingham and Washington because of our weather. Yes, 9 months out of 12, it is amazing. But 3 out of the 12 months are pretty brutal. And we don't get a lot of warm weather throughout the year. We maybe average around 75 degrees or so in the summertime, which to us is amazing. But if you're coming from other states that are a lot hotter, it's not gonna feel as hot. In the wintertime, come December through February, our winters are cold and they are wet. When it comes down to it, 34 degrees outside and it's raining, it is pretty miserable because you're cold and you're wet, and it might as well have snowed because no one wants to be cold and wet. I'd rather just be cold and have it snowing and have beautiful 6 or 8 inches outside. But also in January and February, once the holidays are over, once all the family and all the festivities are done, January and February are the darkest 2 months of the year. And that's where it gets pretty brutal for people. It's not so much the rain, it's not so much the cold, but it is the darkness. In January and in February, the sun rises maybe about 8:15, 8:30 in the morning, and it sets probably about 4 p.m. and it gets pretty dark and pitch black by 4:30 p.m. So those 8 hours or so of sunlight can be pretty brutal. And most of all, the sun doesn't really rise super high and peak high like it does in the summer. It stays pretty flat. So we have a lot of mountains, a lot of trees around here. So you may get a good few hours of good peak of good sunlight, but some of those other hours it gets cold and you can tell it is pretty dark. And driving around with your lights on at 5 p.m. or even at 7:30 or 8 a.m. in the morning, it gets pretty brutal. And for those of you that go to work at 7 and come home at 4 or 5, you leave for work in the dark and you come home in the dark. So that is pretty crazy, and it does get to people, and it does lead, I would say, to some seasonal depression. Reason number 2 has to be our affordability and the cost of living. It is expensive to live here in Bellingham. For whatever reason, I don't know. I think it's more expensive coming from Seattle. I've had clients come from Bellevue, Washington, which is a very high-end, more upscale area in Washington State, and they say that it's more expensive to buy groceries to be living here in Bellingham than it is in Bellevue. And Bellevue is a very sought after area here in Washington, and people who live there make a pretty good living, and it's just more of an upscale area. So to hear that from people that Bellingham is more expensive, it's pretty shocking. Our groceries are gonna be pretty pricey. Our gas is gonna be expensive. So for those of you that are moving out of state, especially from maybe the Midwest or even the South, when your gas prices are $4 or under a gallon, up here in Bellingham and in Washington, let alone, it's gonna be hovering right now, you know, close to that $5 a gallon mark. So it is pretty crazy. Now, for the cost of living and for affordability in housing, the average home price here in Bellingham alone, just the city itself, is gonna be about $850,000. Now, if you go and you take the average for the whole entire county of Whatcom County, it's gonna be about $650,000. Yes, there are more expensive areas in the whole country, and I totally get it. And the biggest stat that kind of drives people crazy is that the average income here in Bellingham is gonna be about $60,000 to $65,000 a year, which isn't a lot compared to some other bigger cities. But when you compare it to the average, home price here in Bellingham, you're talking almost 9 times the average income in Bellingham. So it does get really expensive, and it does make it very difficult for your average person who is earning $60,000 or $65,000 a year to afford a home here in Bellingham, just because we have seen a lot of influx of people moving into Bellingham and increasing those prices over time. So if you're thinking about moving into Bellingham and you're probably in a smaller rural area, or you're coming from Oregon, Idaho, Montana, even Texas, somewhere down south, just know that the cost of living will probably be more expensive. If your average grocery bill is gonna be $400 a month back home wherever you're at, probably add another $200 or so a month just on groceries, because everything that we get around here is pretty expensive. The third reason is gonna be our job market. Now let me explain this one a little bit more. Do we have jobs? Do we have a good careers that surround us? Yes, absolutely. We have the medical field here in Bellingham is probably the largest field and the biggest industry that people have job opportunities at. So yes, we have a pretty good sized hospital. We have a lot of other doctors and nurses, and we have good medical facilities here in Bellingham. So that is great. That employs quite a bit of people. So for those of you that don't know, Bellingham is situated 20 minutes away from the Canadian border. So we have a great industry there at border crossings. We have one in Blaine, we have one in Linden, we have one in Sumas. So that field and that industry does employ quite a bit of people. We also have, like I said, mentioned earlier in this video, we have 3 or 4 refineries that surround us within, 60 or 80 miles, which is great. So you're gonna have a lot of people that will work at the refineries. So we do have those sort of industries and those sort of jobs. Other than that, we don't have anything major that will employ a couple hundred people or even like 1,000 people or so. We have a lot of small businesses around here. We don't have a major company. We don't have a T-Mobile or Amazon or a Microsoft or even, some of these bigger tech companies. Now, it has been easier over the years with people working from home that are able to move here and work from home. But now that things are starting to shift just a little bit and people are requiring to get back into the office, if you do work for a Microsoft or for an Amazon or a big major corporation, we don't have somewhere where you can just drive 20 minutes into the city and work. You're gonna have to require to drive an hour and a half or 2 hours into Seattle to go into those major jobs. A lot of people that are leaving Bellingham, they can't find a job here or they can't work at home, so they have to move to Seattle. They have to move down to California. They have to go down to Texas, especially Houston, because these bigger cities are growing and their populations are getting massive, where a lot of tech companies are starting to invest in those cities and grow pretty massively and building a lot bigger buildings to employ a lot more people. Is it impossible to find a job here? No, absolutely not. You will be able to find a job. Just like our housing market, the job opportunities will probably be less than if you were into a major city. All right, let's get into reason number 4. And before I get into it, make sure to please like and subscribe, hit that bell, get notified for all the videos that we do. It does help us out, and it gives us an opportunity to tell you guys a lot more about what it's like living, breathing, and eating all around here, Bellingham and Whatcom County. Okay, so let's get into reason number 4, and that has to do with our crime, our homelessness, and the drug abuse that has happened over the last recent years. For whatever reason, Bellingham has become a hub, a small hub, just like you've seen in Seattle. There's been a lot of homelessness, a lot of drug use, and a lot more crime than it used to be in the past. Now, it's not as bad as it is in Seattle, but for being a smaller area here in Bellingham, I would say it can be significantly bad. Now, it's not happening all over Bellingham or Whatcom County, but you are seeing it, especially in downtown. We have seen a massive homeless population coming into Bellingham, and you are also seeing a lot more crime that's happening. People are breaking in, you're getting a lot more bikes stolen. Bikes is like the thing around here. People are stealing bikes left and right. As if you guys don't know, Bellingham, I feel, is like the bike capital of the world. We have so much great mountain biking around, and there's so much lucrative bikes that are out there that cost thousands and thousands of dollars that people steal and they'll sell off to wherever. The drugs also become a big problem because there's people that will be doing drugs in the street. Like I said, not everywhere it's happening, mostly downtown, right? Fentanyl is big, and it's not just in Bellingham, it's in Washington State, it's in other areas. So the drugs, the crime, and the homeless, all this stuff right here is detouring people from even living in Bellingham, and let alone just going out to Linden or Ferndale or into the county, and let alone just being in Washington State. So yes, crime, the homelessness, and the drug use around here is gotten really out of control. Hopefully in the coming years, it gets more into control. I know that Bellingham is trying to knock down or actually clean up a lot of these camps that are out random places, and there's hundreds of them with a bunch of tents. And I know they're trying to slowly just knock them down and to just get people away. It may or may not work, but we'll see. But this does lead me into reason number 5 on why this stuff could be happening. And this is the number one thing I was taught as a realtor to never talk about with clients or with anybody at a professional level. And this is our politics. Now, this subject, take it how you want. I'm not saying that our politics are good or they're bad, but the biggest reason why people are leaving Bellingham and Washington State alone has to do with our politics. If you don't know, Washington State is a very, very blue state. A lot of liberal laws, a lot of liberal ideas, and just everything that has to go with a blue political agenda. Now, a lot of people don't agree with a lot of stuff that's going on here, including some of the things that are happening. Myself, I don't agree with it. Now, Bellingham, and if you've seen in Seattle, we've seen a lot of that drug use, a lot of homelessness, and a lot of crime, and it's almost like Washington State is enabling that and not really getting rid of the problem. A lot of people are moving away from Bellingham, Washington into states like Idaho, Montana, Texas, and Arizona. And I'm just letting you know that what is happening in Washington are detouring people from even moving here and or moving out of the state. So if you're looking at moving in here and you're coming from other areas, just know Washington State is like the Texas of a blue state. You have Texas and you have Washington, and they couldn't be any opposite from each other. So just keep that in mind. Do your own research, take a look at what's happening here in the area, take a look at what some of the policies is going on, and see for yourself if this may or may not be a good fit for you. Obviously, there's not everywhere in Washington is gonna be like that. There's a lot of blue areas here in Washington, including Bellingham. But once you get out of Bellingham, you have places like Sumas and Linden and parts of Ferndale where it's more of a blue state sort of mindset, and a little mixture of here and both. So like I said, take that how you want it. Do your own research, take a look, but politics play a big, big role. And this is the biggest reason why people are leaving this state, let alone Bellingham, and why people aren't gonna be moving here. On the opposite side, there's still people that live here. Obviously, there's millions and millions of people that live in Washington. They may not agree with what's going on with Governor Jay Inslee, but they still live here for a reason. And Washington and Bellingham is a beautiful area. Yes, our weathers are tough, and there's obviously a lot more things that I said that aren't the good stuff here in Bellingham. But I love Bellingham. I don't know if I can ever leave. I love going to Arizona. I don't know if I can ever live down there because it's 120 degrees in the summer. Yet they're probably saying the same thing about our winters, that it's all you're gonna do is stay inside. Anyways, guys, these are the 5 reasons why people are moving out of Bellingham, and let alone just Washington State. If you're looking at moving into the area and you've stuck around, please guys, we get calls, emails, and texts, people just like you who are trying to move to Bellingham and or around the county. So if that's you, give us a call, shoot us a text. We'll sit down with you. We'll walk through a lot more of the areas here in Bellingham and Whatcom County. You let us know what amenities you are wanting, and we will help direct you in maybe some good spots on where you want to be here in Bellingham, Whatcom County. In the meantime, any other questions, leave them down below. I'll put all my information down here as well, and we'll see you next time.